Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I hope you'll be able to hear me properly, but I've had bronchitis for 6 whole weeks. And so my voice is a little bit, normally I would start by greeting you with the call of the wild chimpanzee, but I'm not going to do it because that might be...
Colin 1.
Oh, well, that wasn't me. So, I think many of you probably saw the movie Jane, I'm not sure, but maybe you did, so you know something about my life's journey. But I want to go back to the very beginning. How did it all start? I was born loving animals in England, and I was very fortunate in having a wonderful mother. And she supported this love of animals. And when I say that, let me tell you what I mean. I was just 4.5 years old. We lived in London, so not so many animals in London. And I still remember vividly when Mum took me for a holiday onto a farm in the country, and a proper farm, when the animals went around in the fields, not cramped up like these horrible intensive factory farms of today. And I was given a job to help collect the hens' eggs. So they mostly laid them in these little wooden hen houses. I think there were about 6 of them. And the nest boxes were around the edge. So I would take my little basket and open the lid. If there was an egg, pop it in my basket. Well, apparently, I began asking everybody, but where's the hole where the egg comes out? I couldn't see a hole like that. And nobody told me. So what I remember vividly is seeing this hen. She was brown, and she was going into one of these hen houses. And I must have thought, she's going to lay an egg. So I crawled after her. Well, that was a mistake, and she flew out, I suppose, with squawks of fear. But now I'm on the path of discovery. I want to find out. And I must have thought, no hen will lay an egg here. This is now a frightening place. So I went into an empty hen house and waited. And apparently, I was gone for over 4 hours, which for a little girl of 4 is quite a long time. I can still vividly remember this hen coming in, and I don't know who was more excited when she laid that egg, the hen, bok, 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 or me. At any rate, by this time, my mother had no idea where I was. They'd even called the police. It was beginning to get dark, so you can imagine how nervous she was, and how many mothers would have said, "How dare you go off without telling us? Don't you dare do that again," which would have spoiled all the excitement. She saw my shining eyes and sat down to hear the wonderful story of how a hen lays an egg. And I tell that story for a reason. Isn't that the making of a little scientist? Curiosity, asking questions, not getting the right answer, deciding to find out for yourself, making a mistake, not giving up, and learning patience. And all of that scientific curiosity might have been crushed if I had a different kind of mother. She found books for me about animals, thinking I would learn to read more quickly. There was no television back then. I've lived on this planet a long time. I've seen many changes. So what we had was books, the radio, and also listening to the stories of our elders. And I don't think during the war that they were actually making children's books. And so most of the books came from the library. But I found a little second-hand bookshop. I used to spend hours there. And one day I saved up my few pennies of pocket money. I had just enough to buy this little book. I've still got it today. And it was called Tarzan of the Apes. So I read it from cover to cover. And what did that Tarzan do? I fell passionately in love with this glorious Lord of the Jungle, and he went and married the wrong Jane. So I was very jealous. Of course, I knew there wasn't a Tarzan, but that's when my dream began. I was 10 years old. I will grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them. How will you do that? You don't have money. Africa's far away. Anyway, you're just a girl. girls don't do that sort of thing. But not my mother. Jane, she said, if you really want to do this, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of opportunity, but don't give up. So the story of how I got to Africa is not important. I had to save up. I didn't go to university because we couldn't.
Screensaver, passing downtown Los Angeles.
What? I thought I was in Dubai. Am I wrong? Big Brother is watching us. Just be quiet. So anyhow, I saved up when I was invited to Africa by a school friend for a holiday. I worked as a waitress because I couldn't save up money with my job in London. I got to Africa and was fortunate to meet the famous Louis S.B. Leakey, the paleontologist anthropologist. And I think he was impressed by how much I knew about African animals, even though I'd only just arrived from England. At any rate, that led to the amazing opportunity of going to study not just any animal, but the one most like us, the chimpanzee. Of course, when I first got to Gombe, it was a daunting task. How would I ever find the chimpanzees? And when I did, they took one look at this peculiar white ape and ran away. And I was getting really worried. There was just money for 6 months. And weeks turned into months. And still, yes, I could see the chimps with my binoculars, but I knew I needed to get close. And fortunately, one of them, I called him David Greybeard because he had this beautiful white beard, and he began to lose his fear of me. And on this never-to-be-forgotten day, using my binoculars, I saw him reach out, break off grass stems, use them to fish termites from their underground nest. And then I saw him break off leafy twigs, and to use them as tools, he had to strip the leaves on the side twigs. He was using and making tools, which wouldn't be exciting at all if you saw it today. Many animals use and make tools. But back then it was thought by science that humans, and only humans, used and made tools. We were defined as man, the tool maker. And so it was that observation that enabled Leakey to go to National Geographic Society in the US. And they agreed not only to fund the research, but to send out a photographer and filmmaker, Hugo van Lawick. That incredible footage that he took all those years ago in 1963. And so with money assured, I could really settle down to learn about the chimpanzees. They let me get closer. And in the end, it was almost as though they didn't accept me as one of them, but they accepted me as a normal part of their environment. And so I got to know them as individuals. I named them. I began to realize more and more how like us they actually are. And kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another on the back, swaggering, males competing for dominance, especially for that alpha top position, swaggering at each other, reminding me a lot of certain male human politicians today. No names. And so I was able to find out as time went on that there's good and bad mothers in chimp society. The good mothers are just like mine, supportive. And looking back over the years, we know the offspring of the supportive mothers do better. The females have more offspring, the males sire more offspring because they reach a higher position in the hierarchy. So it was a shock to find out that they can also have a kind of primitive war. They have a violent, aggressive streak just like us, but they also show love, compassion, and altruism just as we do. So it's pretty clear. There isn't a sharp line dividing us from them. I've been in the field about 2 years when Leakey told me I had to get a degree because he wouldn't always be around to get money. And he found me a place in Cambridge University to do a degree in animal behavior, a PhD, even though I'd never been to college. So when I got there, I was very nervous. Imagine how I felt when these erudite professors told me I'd done everything wrong. I should have given the chimps numbers. That was scientific, not names, Fifi, Mike, Goliath. I couldn't talk about them having personality or minds capable of thinking, and certainly not emotions, happiness, sadness, fear, despair. But luckily, when I was a child, I had an amazing teacher who taught me that for all their erudite book learning, in this respect, those professors were wrong. And that was my dog, Rusty. You can't share your life in a meaningful way with a dog, a cat, a horse, a bird, a falcon, any of those creatures. You know that of course they have personalities. Of course they can work things out. Of course they can feel happy or sad or angry or depressed. So I persisted. I got my PhD and went back to Gombe and set up a research station. Students began coming from different parts of the world, studying different aspects of chimp behavior. And I could spend hours each day out in the rainforest, which is where I love most to be. And out in the rainforest, you learn how everything is interconnected, how every little species, no matter how small, has a role to play in this amazing tapestry of life that today we call biodiversity. I think a lot of people don't really know what biodiversity means. It's a scientific word. I like the tapestry of life myself. At any rate, I also felt a great spiritual connection in the rainforest. I felt the presence of a great spiritual power, and that for me was very important. It was the best time of my life. So why did I leave? Why on earth am I traveling 300 days a year around the world? It happened in 1986. By then, there were about 7 different scientists with field sites studying chimps across Africa. When I began, it was just me. And we brought them together in Chicago. And it was mainly to find out how chimp behavior may vary from place to place. Does it depend just on the environment? Or, as I believed, and have now been shown to be right, are there cultural traditions passed from one generation to the next through observation and learning? And we also had a session on conservation, which was a huge shock because it showed that right across Africa, chimp numbers were dropping, forests were disappearing. The bushmeat trade had begun. That's the commercial hunting of wild animals for food. And there was logging. And there was the live animal trade where mothers are shot to steal their babies for the commercial sale to other countries for entertainment, for zoos, and in those days for medical research. And we had a session on conditions in some captive situations, and I couldn't sleep for nights seeing our closest relatives in 5-foot by 5-foot cages. Maybe for 30, 40 years, they can live to be more than 60. Why were they in those cages in the medical research labs? Because their bodies are so like ours. They can catch our diseases. Their DNA differs from ours by only just over 1%. And the scientists were absolutely not prepared to admit the equally striking behavioral and psychological similarities. So I went to that conference, which lasted 4 days, as a scientist. I left as an activist. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what to do. I got a bit of money, and I managed to get to 7 different African range countries. And yes, I learned a lot about the plight of the chimps, but I was also learning something else. I was learning the plight of so many of the African people living in and around chimpanzee habitats, the crippling poverty, the lack of good education, the good health facilities, and of course, the ethnic violence. And it came to a head when I flew over my own little Gombe National Park. It's the smallest national park in Tanzania, It's only 35 square kilometers. In 1990, Gombe was just a little island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills. More people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, cutting the trees on these very steep slopes of the valleys along the edge of Lake Tanganyika, so that there was terrible erosion, the streams getting silted up, people struggling to survive. And that's when it hit me. If we don't do something to improve the lives of these people, we can't even try to save the chimpanzees. So that's when the Jane Goodall Institute began our program, Take Care, or Tukari as it's known. And we didn't go into these villages in the normal way as a bunch of arrogant white people going and telling the Africans what we were going to do to make their lives better. No, it was a team of carefully selected local Tanzanians. And they went in and listened to the villagers and asked them how they thought we could help. And that's where we began. So that program, which began in the 12 villages around Gombe, and by the way, I think one of the most important interventions we were able to introduce was microcredit based on Muhammad Yunus's Grameen Bank. But also they wanted more food, which meant restoring fertility to the land without chemicals, by the way, and better health facilities, better education. We worked with the local Tanzanian authorities and persuaded them to do what they should have been doing anyway. And we introduced water management. We also introduced scholarships to keep girls in school beyond puberty, since it's known that all around the world, as women's education improves, family size tends to drop. And we introduced family planning information by the local people, very well received, by the way. And so that program became so successful that it's now in all 72 villages throughout the chimpanzee range in Tanzania. Each of these villages has provided 1 or 2 volunteers who have become forest monitors, because most of Tanzania's wild chimps live not in protected national parks, but in village forest reserves, which aren't protected at all. And so by working with the people, helping them to understand the health of the forest is important for their own long-term survival. And then getting these forest monitors where they, even if they couldn't read or write, learned to use smartphones. And they decided what they would record in their forests. They decided so that they all recorded the same thing: an illegally cut tree, an animal trap, a cartridge on the ground, or on the positive side, a chimpanzee sighting, or a nest, or perhaps a leopard paw print. And they're very proud of this work. When they get to where it's possible, they upload it onto a platform in the clouds, Global Forest Watch, and so the data is completely transparent. And using GIS, GPS to record exactly where they are. So we have a wonderful person on our team, Lillian Pintea, and he's really taken JGI to the cutting edge of this kind of conservation work. That program, which has definitely saved the Gombe chimps, but Tanzania's other chimps as well, is now in 6 other African countries around chimpanzee habitat, having the same effect. Of course, costs money. And so I began traveling, giving talks, kind of like this, wanting people to become aware of what was going on. And as I was traveling all around the world, first in North America, then in different parts of Asia, and of course Europe, I was meeting so many young people who did not seem to have much hope for the future. They were mostly just apathetic. Didn't seem to matter what they did. They didn't care. But some of them were depressed, and some of them were angry, even violent. And when I began talking to these young people, they all said more or less the same thing. We have compromised the future of our young people. There's a saying which goes, We haven't inherited this planet from our parents. We've borrowed it from our children. I don't think so. I think we have a window of time, in spite of what some scientists tell us, that we're on a downward trajectory and there's no hope of recovery. So I started this program, Roots and Shoots, which began with 12 high school students around in Tanzania. They were concerned about poaching in the national parks. Some of them worried about the treatment of stray dogs. Some of them were concerned about the street children with no homes. They had different worries. So I suggested they got their friends together who also were concerned as to what was going on. And we had a meeting of about, 35 people. And from that, our Roots and Shoots program was born. And we decided from the beginning that the main message would be every single individual matters. Every single individual has a role to play, even if they don't yet know what it is. But most important of all, every single individual, every one of us, makes some impact on the planet every single day. And we're in a position where we can choose the kind of impact that we make. Because I'd understood about the interrelatedness of all things out in the rainforest, we decided that each group would choose projects for itself to make the world better. One, to help people. As this program began to grow, spreading from those 12 high school students in Dar es Salaam to young people across Tanzania, and then going international. And we began to form groups, not just high school, but kindergarten, university, and everything in between. There's about 150,000 groups now around the world in nearly 80 countries. And a film was made about, I think it was about 8 years ago now. And it's a film that's been sitting. If we put these lights off, I think people would see better. Can we turn the overhead lights off? We can't. No, sorry then. Anyhow, this, as I say, was taken about 8 years ago. The dark green is where there were most Roots and Shoots. There's much more dark green now. The paler green, there's fewer, and now there's more pale green as well. And some of the pale green is dark green, and some of the white is filled in. And this little film just gives you a 2-minute feeling of the kind of projects that Roots and Shoots kids are doing around the world. So if we can play it. No, we've lost the video. We've got stuck on the map. Ah, there we are. In case you can't see, it's Soweto, South Africa. USA and Canada. Nepal. North Korea, 2 groups there, not anymore. Argentina is now huge. Austria, growing everywhere. And we've got about 2,000 groups right across China, which I think is very important. People coming up saying, but of course I care about the environment. I was in your Roots and Shoots program in primary school. So these young people are changing the world. And one thing that's grown up as a result of the program, which we didn't even put there in the beginning, is that because we bring them together as much as we can, usually virtually, but sometimes face to face, particularly within a country, but they're beginning to understand that we may wear different clothes, we may have different cultures, different religions, we may eat different things, we may have different colored skin, but if we fall and cut ourselves, our blood is the same. It's proven to be so. And if we laugh, it's because we get this wonderful feeling that something's funny, even though culturally it may differ a little bit, a sense of humor. And if we weep, our tears are the same, that we are one human family. So Roots and Shoots is gradually helping young people understand the role that they can play, and in fact are playing already as they go through life. And some reasons for hope. We're going through a very dark time now on the planet. There's violence and war, there's refugees, there's swings to the far right. There are environmental safeguards being torn down because everywhere economic development is put ahead of protecting nature, even though by destroying nature we are destroying our own future. Isn't it weird? I talk about the similarities between chimps and humans. What's the one big difference? One big difference is that our intellect has developed so explosively. I mean, we've sent a rocket to Mars, and little robots have crawled off and are taking photographs. The Chinese have sent a rocket that's landed on the dark side of the moon. We've seen those photographs. We don't want to go and live on the moon or Mars, at least I don't. And we've got this one beautiful green and blue planet Earth. How is it that the most intellectual creature that's ever walked the planet is destroying its only home? Is it because there's some disconnect between this clever brain and the human heart, love and compassion? I truly believe that when head and heart learn to work in harmony, can we achieve our true human potential. But reasons for hope, yes. Number one, the youth. What they're doing is amazing. You've got a tiny taste. I think most of you couldn't even see the screen. I'm sorry about that. But they are changing the world, even as we speak. They're educating their parents and their grandparents. I've heard the parents say, well, of course I do this now, my kids make me. And so a great reason for hope. I'm sure many of you read about the 15-year-old little girl who stood up at the climate summit in Poland and said, we're not asking the government to do something, we're telling you you are going to do something, and started this, let's not go to school until they do something. I think probably a lot of kids love that idea, but still I would have. But anyway, we know what we've done to the planet. I think we all do. There's much more awareness today. People don't want to face it. They hide their heads in the sand. And we know that we're polluting the air, the water, and the land. We know that we're recklessly burning fossil fuels. We know that we're polluting the ocean with plastic and other noxious chemicals. We know that we're growing our food with chemicals sprayed onto the food and onto the land that are proven, if people would only believe it, to be capable of producing cancer. And we know that we're chopping down the rainforests, losing this tapestry of life, this biodiversity. The ocean and the forest are the two great lungs of the world, absorbing carbon dioxide, breathing out oxygen. We need them. And yet the ocean in many places has become so acidified it can no longer absorb CO2 and it can't give out oxygen. And the forests, as they're burned, are releasing all, or even if they're just cut down, they're releasing the stored CO2 out into the environment, causing these greenhouse gases. I think we all know about the fossil fuel. We know about the oceans and the forests. a lot of people either don't know or don't want to know that as more and more people around the world eat more and more meat, this is one of the most harmful environmental problems that we face. Because animals are now, well, maybe you don't care about the cruelty to animals, but many people do. And these factory farms, if you ever go into one or see secretly filmed video, it's awful. But they have to be fed, these animals. Areas of environment are destroyed in order to grow food. Fossil fuel is used to take the grain to the animals to slaughter, the meat to the table. Lots of water, and water is becoming a major problem around the world. And I think you know that perfectly well here in the UAE. And water is wasted, turning vegetable protein into animal protein. And these animals, particularly cows, because they're ruminants, they belch a lot, burp, whatever you want to call it. And they produce gas in their digestion. All of us do. We'll have no demonstrations in this room, please. That gas is methane. That is an even more virulent greenhouse gas than CO2, although luckily not as frequent. But even people who don't care about the environment, don't care about animal welfare, they probably care about their own health. So these animals, to keep them alive, are routinely fed antibiotics. The bacteria are building up resistance. People are dying from a scratch on a finger. So here we are, harming the planet, stealing the future of our children. What are we going to do about it? And I think what we're going to do about it is think about how we live our own lives. And there are some people in high positions who can affect millions of lives by just signing or not signing a piece of paper. But all of us can have our own impact every single day. So I strayed away from hope because I wanted to get in about the meat eating because it's so important. But so youth is hope, the human brain, now that we've realized that we're harming the planet, more and more technology is being invented that can help us live in better harmony. And in our own lives, we can think about helping the planet. Then there's the resilience of nature. A perfect example. I talked about flying over Gombe, a little island of forest. Fly over Gombe today. Everywhere there's trees. Nature is resilient. The trees have grown back from seeds and roots in the soil. And animal species on the brink of extinction can be given another chance. Social media, for the first time in human history, it's possible to bring voices from all around the world to rise up on a single day with a single mission. We want to slow down climate change, or whatever the issue may be. And finally, the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle what seems to be impossible and won't give up. And that's why I carry Mr. H with me. Mr. H was given to me 28 years ago. He's an old friend now. And he was given to me by a man called Gary Horn, which is why he's Mr. H. Gary Horn went blind when he was 21 in the US Marines. For some odd reason, he decided that he wanted to be a magician. Everybody said, but Gary, you can't be a magician if you're blind. He said, well, I can try. I've watched his show. He works with kids. You can't tell he's blind. He arranges his props beforehand. It's completely amazing. He thought he was giving me a stuffed chimpanzee, and I said, Gary, I know you can't see it's the wrong color. I made him hold the tail. Chimps don't have tails. He said, never mind. Take him where you go. You know I'm with you in spirit. So he's now been to 64 countries with me. I mean, come on, he's even been to North Korea. That's quite something, isn't it? So Mr. H, he's one of my symbols of hope. But these people with indomitable spirits are all around us. And I think the point that is so important to make here, there isn't one person in this room, not one, who doesn't have that same indomitable spirit. Some people just haven't realized. They don't grow it. It stays there waiting for the call, but they don't grow it, they don't call it forth. We all can do it. And if we really want to change the world for our children and theirs, we need to take action now. Thank you. Thank you. I can tell you all agree.
We'll take 3 questions, and any more questions you may have, please direct it to Tara. Tara, you'll raise your hand, and she'll answer any questions that you may have. So,
Thank you. My name is Mahendra Shah. I've spent 30 years working on sustainable development. Today the world is disenfranchised, fragmented in the human society. 30 million species, and I think you're pioneering work with the primates. And today the population of the primates is the same as the human babies being born. I came to this lecture having followed you for the last 20, 30 years, listening more to the primates. But you have pointed something out in your pioneering work in Dar es Salaam, that the future is in the hands of children and youth. They have no vested interest, like governments and like business. The question is, how can we mobilize? You referred to Greta Thunberg. Before Greta was Severin Suzuki at Rio 92 meeting. The question is, how can we mobilize the children and the youth, not only to have a voice, but to force governments and business to action, because the window of opportunity ahead is very limited.
It's very small.
And it's getting more and more limited as every year passes.
Yeah.
We believe that 30, 50 years, and the children, the youth of today will be 50 now, and their children will be asking the same question as Greta asked. So, from your experience in Dar es Salaam and other places,
All over the
how
world.
can we mobilize the children and the youth to first put pressure on their parents, and the parents can put pressure on governments and business?
Well,
Change.
our youth program, Roots and Shoots, is precisely doing that. There are many, there's some countries where you can't lobby the government. You can't in China, you'll be out. You can't in Russia, you'll be disappeared. You know, we have to, the program grows respecting or being very aware of the culture, the religion in which it's growing. So it grows differently in each country. But for example, in the United States, our groups are writing letters to their congressmen, to their senators. They're writing to business. There's a number of groups in Australia fighting the oil palm industry and tackling head-on different companies. So it's all happening. My problem is I want to grow this program wider and wider and wider. We've got, Tara, what is it, 65 groups in 100 groups in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Okay, so we're growing, but obviously we need help to grow further. We grow partly through partnering with other similar organizations, because I don't believe any one person or any one organization can make the change we need in the limited time we have. So we work with more and more we're working with other organizations. But the name Roots and Shoots is binding them all so that they feel part of something huge, and that gives them strength and courage. And wherever we are, like in China, I've met older people who say, well, of course I do this because my grandchildren make me. And there's one elderly lady, and her grandchild was only 4, but her grandchild was making her recycle, Granny. The planet can't deal with all this rubbish. And so what you say is what I'm trying to do. It's one of the reasons I'm traveling 300 days a year around the world. I'm nearly 85. I don't know how much longer I can go on doing it, but I have people like Tara who are helping in the different countries, helping us to grow. So I would throw the question back to you, not to answer now, but how can you help us to grow this, because it is making a difference. And by the way, why is it called Roots and Shoots? You've got some beautiful trees around here. I've seen them. They start from a little seed, and if you pick it up when it begins to grow, it seems so small and insignificant. Little shoot, little roots, but there's a magic, a life force in that seed, so powerful that those little roots to reach the water can work through rocks and push them aside, and that little shoot to reach the sun can work through cracks in a brick wall and knock it down. So we see the rocks in the walls as all the problems, social and environmental, that we have inflicted and are inflicting. So it's hope. Hundreds and thousands of young people, Roots and Shoots, around the world can break it down and make it a better world for all living things. So I suspect there's people in this room who can help us with our efforts to grow the program. All right, you and you. It's the other two hands I see.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you today and listen to you. Despite our revolution with technologies, with social media, with our learning and education, we still face the clash between us in the far right and crisis, human crisis happening around the world, as you're aware, and people fled for their life. And we're still fighting for ideology, we're still fighting each other, and we don't understand that we can share this planet together. So how we can engage, with all these crises and wars, how can we stop it? Is it up to a politician only to stop it, what your hope on these crises and these wars to end? What is your hope? What's your hope?
Well, I think the answer is probably different in different countries, because some countries you can do massive lobbying or strikes, or I guess we can have yellow vests and revolutions, and other countries, if you start something like that, you go to jail. So it is different in different countries, but I think, the awareness, as I say, is growing, and people feeling helpless. So we have to try and take away that feeling of helplessness, and for everybody to realize that in their sphere, in their country, in their religion, they can make a difference. And then through social media, linking up these people so that they don't feel alone anymore. How can we change what's going on? I can't see an overall change like that. I think it has to grow up. But there's different people doing different things. There's different people tackling it in different ways. One thing that's a curse, corruption. Governments are sometimes in the pocket of the big corporations, because it's the big corporations like oil and gas who are paying for the campaigns, election campaigns. And so if the oil and gas pays for your election campaign and you happen to win, then you're going to support the new coal mine or fracking or something like that. And that's what has to go. But don't ask me how to get rid of it, except that we certainly talk about it with the youth. And the youth hate it as much as I do.
So we said different things for different people. Everyone
Yeah.
has different.
I think if we, do what you can do, tackle what you can tackle, and know that there's other people with their own speciality tackling it in this way. And hopefully we all come together in time. That's the key, isn't it? In time.
Firstly, thank you very much for your stirring and enlightening speech. I agree completely in your opinion about the youth, my generation, and our potential for change. What's mainly disheartening is that mainly due to the extent of the problems and due to our complete lack of experience, is that we don't know where to begin in our endeavors or initiatives. obviously, I've experienced this in creating a change. So, how would you say my generation go about in trying to venture in solving the problems that we face right now?
Okay, well, what I would say, I've already said it actually in a roundabout way. First of all, get involved. Start a Roots and Shoots group. I'm serious. I'm not just saying that. Then you'll be with other young people who feel passionate like you but don't know what to do. We have this amazing power of speech. We can discuss. We can share knowledge. We can bring together people from with different experiences, try and solve some of the problems that the group cares about. And when you start doing that, there's another thing. A lot of young people, they're worried about everything, but you can't do everything. But there's something you can do. And if you get one of those groups going, you'll find you have a very different feeling about the way ahead, because you'll be together and you will have come to these decisions as to what you can do as a group, several things perhaps, and you'll feel very differently. And I'm saying that because people tell me, so I have to believe them. And we'll make sure, Tara, that you get his name, and we'll find out whether he creates a Roots and Shoots group. And there's one last 2-minute video. Do people want to? Can you? Okay, well then, let me tell you. One of the things that our institute does in Africa is to look after the orphan chimps whose mothers are being shot, either for bushmeat or the babies are being confiscated from the illegal wildlife trafficking. And the biggest sanctuary for orphan chimps in Africa is in Congo, Republic of Congo. It's called Chimpunga. It's now got 175 chimps, many of whom are adult. And fortunately, the government's given us 3 large forested islands. And this little video, which some of you may have seen, but watch it again. The chimp that you see being released onto the island, I only met this day. I didn't know her before. And it was probably the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. So let's watch it, and then I'll say one word at the end as to what's happened to her now.
This is a really exciting moment for me. The Jane Congo Chimpanzee Rehabilitation Center in the Republic of Congo has for years been caring for infants whose mothers were killed, mostly for the illegal bushmeat trade. Many of them are now fully grown. Recently, we acquired 3 large forested islands on the beautiful Kwilu River, where we can release many of the chimpanzees from chimpanzees. And we hope ultimately to have about 6 on the island. Today is the first time I met Julia. I talked to her on the boat, trying to reassure her. She must have wondered what was happening. None of us could predict exactly what she would do once the cage door opened. It was a very, very touching moment. One of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me. The warmth of her embrace is something I shall never forget. For Wunda and all the other chimpanzees we're working to bring here, Chinzula Island will provide a wonderful forest home where they will be cared for and safe.
So, Wunda is now the dominant female of a group of 30. Even she dominates the males, although that will change. We have so many chimpanzees, it's very expensive out there looking after them. So the females are on birth control, they have implants. All these years, one implant went wrong, just one. Wunda. She had a baby 2 years ago out on the island in the group. No one was expecting it. Mother and baby are doing fine, and the baby is called Hope. Thank you.
Scorch you out.
Mm.
Okay.
So just a final round of applause for Dr. Jane Goodall.